This is Equipping Grace. In this episode, Pastor Ben and Pastor Matt sit down to discuss the importance of living on mission and share some details about the Friends of the Homeless ministry here at Grace Church.
So it was about, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago that I really started working within missions at our church. I really want to see our family here at Grace not just live vicariously through our missionaries, but actually be engaged on mission. And how do we do that? And so we actually started our short-term missions teams on the ground in Ocala to sort of give the property a facelift, and then we went down to Miami and worked with a Haitian church down there and transitioned a former strip club into the church where they have meetings down there in North Miami. And then from then on, we've been working every year in Haiti. That's a connection to the church there in Miami. And then it's been really exciting to see, even on the ground here in Sebring, in our surrounding community, things like Care Portal, and also this Friends of the Homeless ministry that started. But tell me a little bit, like how did that all start? Where did that come from?
It's one of my favorite stories of things that have just kind of transpired in the last year at Grace. And the cool thing about it is it's not even just a Grace thing. So I was working on something in my office, and somebody walked in, and it turned out to be Gene Statler, who has been a long time member of our community, and I think he taught at the college for years and years. And anyway, he's a member at Highlands Community Church and part of a small group that has a real fire and a focus and a passion for serving with the homeless in Highlands County. And so he proposed me this idea because they had been involved for, I think, a year or two down at First Baptist Church in downtown Sebring, where they serve a breakfast, I think, on Wednesdays every single week. And so there's just kind of this big team of people at First Baptist who take on every week serving a breakfast. And the whole idea behind the breakfast is to get, obviously, a spiritual connection and be able to speak truth into these guys and gals' lives, but also to get them connected with resources in the community to potentially get them off of the street. And so obviously that ministry has been really successful. They serve as many as 100 a week. So the idea was to bring this concept that was already working well in one place in Sebring, and to bring it on this side of 27. Since at the end of the day, if you don't have a car, Sebring is a big place. And we knew, especially at the time, there was a settlement that was living by Aldi, kind of in an undeveloped section there, and they've since moved. But anyway, we knew that there were people who were living, whether it was in the woods or wherever, right, in their vehicles on this side of 27. And so we knew that would be a need. And that at the end of the day, just because there's a breakfast served in one place doesn't mean that another meal couldn't be helpful to the same people. So there are 4 churches, actually 5 now, that partner in this ministry. And each church takes a week of the month, and on that Monday puts together an early dinner meal. It starts at 4. And it goes till 6. Usually on a average month, we have 6 to 8 people cooking, but there's sort of a pool of volunteers that, obviously some people are gone certain months and can't be a part of it, but probably a little more than a dozen people, in total, who get an email every month about a meeting to come and plan the meal and then show up and serve the meal. And
so for somebody that is getting involved in this, if someone is doing cooking and going to this event, I would say probably between 4 and 5 hours of an investment per month to make a huge impact, to really get a huge return on investment of 4 or 5 hours of your time. So it's pretty cool. So if they're looking from two different perspectives. Number one, from the perspective of the person who is homeless or in need and coming for a meal. What can they expect walking into that? And from the perspective of a volunteer who's a part of it, what does that expect? What does that look like?
Yeah, we call the ministry Friends of the Homeless, and the focus there isn't on the homeless part as much as it is on the friends part. And that's because we know that coming as a person who's in need to a place that you might not spend a lot of time, a church, being, served food by, strangers and whatnot, that can kind of be, that could be an overwhelming experience. That could be something that is stressful, and we don't want it to be that. And I think there's no way to get over the hump of somebody coming for the first time, but we really try our hardest to greet people warmly. At the door, when they walk in, there's a registration table. It kind of helps us to keep track of how many people have been to each meal. We give them a name tag so that they can be greeted by name, and people can just go right into the conversation. Hey, Jeff, how are you doing? And really our goal is to feed them the meal, and so they'll go through buffet style, or if there's somebody who's got mobility problems, we'll actually come out and serve them a plate. And a couple of the ladies are always asking people if they want a drink and things like that. So it's not exactly a restaurant feel. That's not really what we're going for. We do want them to feel like they're welcome and have this warm sense of hospitality, but it's really just people having a meal together, And so
the Highlands community has a great space for that.
Yeah, they do. You walk in and it's kind of a cafe, almost living room type setup, and it's big enough to be able to feed 30, 40, 50 people, if everybody sat down. So from the side of the volunteer, it starts a couple of weeks before the actual meal with a planning meeting where we all sit down. It's not a long thing. It's about 30 minutes. We sit down and talk about, okay, so what did we make last time? So what do we want to make? What are we going to do now? And we like to keep it, kind of a variety of things. And we try to serve hot meals and home cooked stuff, the kind of stuff you'd want to eat. And it's also a lot of fun because we've kind of built a lot of relationships around the project of this ministry. And so it's a fun time. And then we usually show up a little earlier than 4, and kind of get everything set out and get ready to greet people and to have conversations. And the time always flies. When we got started, I think there was a lot of nerves around, was this going to be an awkward encounter? Was this going to be something you kind of have to grit your teeth and get through? And it really isn't. It's a lot of fun to talk with the guests, to talk with each other, and really just build relationships. And
so some people are sitting across from people who are guests at this meal, having conversations. Yeah. Pointed. Some people are serving. Some people are. Right.
Yeah, everybody kind of eats something usually. If you don't actually sit down across from somebody, you're always munching on stuff, and it just creates sort of a friendly atmosphere, and that's what we're going for. And that's the beauty of food, right? Because at the end of the day, we know that a meal doesn't change the life necessarily of somebody who doesn't have a place to stay. It actually doesn't really get to their biggest need, which is a lack of shelter. But what it does do is it gives an opportunity to kind of break down the barrier wall between, people who have shelter and people who don't. Because at the end of the day, we know that there is a wall. There's a separation there, and it's not just about money. It's also about hope and about emotional security and all kinds of things like that. And so
out of the time that you've been there, give me one or two stories that has made a huge impact, maybe on the guests, maybe on the volunteers, to be able to have this small investment of time, talent and treasure, to be able to pull this off. But there can be huge impacts for that. So what's two stories or one story that comes to your mind?
Well, there's really two, and I think they happened in the same day, and neither of them has to do with food, which is kind of funny. But there was a lady that came in very late one day to the meal, and we were kind of packing up, getting ready to leave. And she came in, and she was, you could tell she was frazzled, frustrated, because she realized that she was late, but she didn't know that when she was coming that she was late. The team kind of puts together a plate for her really quick, and and a couple of them sit down across from her and just kind of talk about her day and what was going on, because it was obvious that she was upset, and they got to have a really good conversation. And in the midst of that, she said that she was late because she had recently lost the watch that she had. And by the end of the conversation, one of our volunteers, somebody from Grace, had taken off her watch and given it to this lady. Now I've talked to the lady that did this, and she says, it's not a big deal. Like, I have 5 other watches in a drawer at home. It wasn't a big ask for her to give this away, but for that lady, it was a big deal, and she got teary-eyed and emotional about it, and it was just one of those opportunities to go above and beyond, and one of those things that causes people to ask the question, why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? And obviously our answer is because this is the way that Jesus walked. He was looking to serve the least of these. He wasn't afraid to meeting needs. Yeah. There's another guy who came, a kind of a similar story, had a hard time getting there. He has a bike. That's how he gets around. And he was on his way up 27 and blew a tire just by the mall. And so he had to push his bike the rest of the way to Highlands Community, which is about a mile and a half or so. And by the time he got there, it had started pouring down rain. This was at the beginning of the summer. And so,
Compounded.
Right, rough day. And so another one of our volunteers, while he was going and getting his meal, went and got this guy an Innertube and changed out the tire on his bike. And so he got to leave there not just with a full stomach, but with a bike that was actually working, which wasn't working when he showed up. And so it's another one of those things where, not a big thing, probably a $5, maybe $10 Innertube, Yeah, those are 2 stories that, at the end of the day, those are the kind of interactions and opportunities to not just bless people, but to be blessed, to be a blessing, and to be that conduit that God designed us to be. And it doesn't even have to be a big thing, but because we've developed the relationships with these people, these folks that Jesus loves, we actually get to be the hands and feet. So.